Hello, and thank you for joining the CannAtlantic Conference, the country's first Mid-Atlantic cannabis conference brought to you by the Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists. If you're watching this particular session, this session is sponsored by Minority Cannabis Business Association, a business league created to serve the specific needs of minority cannabis entrepreneurs, workers, patients, and consumers. In this conversation, you'll hear from MCBA's president, Jason Ortiz, and their senior policy advisor, Amber Littlejohn, talk about the work that MCBA has been doing since its founding in 2015 and what they'll be pushing for heading in 2021. There's a lot happening in the Mid-Atlantic region. MCBA is all around the country, so they're going to be heavily involved in what we're doing in this area. Jason, Amber, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, and I look forward for viewers to learn a little bit more about MCBA and the work that you both are doing.
Right on. Thank you, Tahid. Thank you for all your help, and thank you for helping draft MCBA's model policy rewrite that is currently in process. You're part of that process. And so for folks that don't know about MCBA, we are a trade association that is national. We're comprised of entrepreneurs and activists and folks in the ancillary market that want to get people of color in the industry as owners, employees, and consumers. And so all three of those. But we are most strong in our policy work. And so we think of ourselves as an advocacy group and a policy think tank that produces policies that anyone in the country can use to advance the cause of equity in their community. And so when we formed MCBA, there was a lot of interested folks that wanted to get involved. But quite frankly, there was so much need for our services and so many people that wanted to work with us, we just couldn't actually organize everyone. And so we decided, instead of trying to be everywhere all the time, we should create tools that any activist can use to be more effective wherever they are. And so we had our first policy summit back in 2016 in DC. And our idea was we wanted to have policy drafted by, funded by people of color, so that when we were advocating in various legislatures or city councils, we weren't always arguing against bad bills, but we're able to produce a real good bill, an equity-centric bill that could be the topic of conversation rather than half measures that don't really address the issues of racism and the war on drugs and its impacts on our communities. And so we brought together 25 people of color for the first one, and they've grown ever since. And there's actually been 4 of them. We've had them in DC, Atlanta, Oakland, and Puerto Rico. And it's been a fantastic experience every single time to see so many bright people of color come together specifically to talk about what we want. And so at its core, our model policy is a comprehensive approach to articulate what do we want to see in the cannabis industry for our communities. And so because the war on drugs was so comprehensive in how it disrupted our communities, we really had to be comprehensive in our approach to heal that damage. And so we have many, 20 different sections of our original bill. There's 10 different model ordinances for the local level. And we really wanted to make sure that we address things like, how do we protect vulnerable communities? How do we ensure patients have the ability to continue to get their medicine? While also, how do we ensure that folks can start businesses both in our communities and elsewhere and build generational wealth for our kids and our grandkids? And we were lucky enough to be able to do that multiple times and just have such fantastic people as part of the association. And I do think the ability to bring business owners, advocates, folks from outside the cannabis space to come and talk plainly about how we address racism and its impacts on our lives has really allowed us to provide tools that just weren't available 5-10 years ago. As many of you in this room know, the conversation around equity has advanced dramatically since we first started in Colorado in 2014. And now with the recent passage of legalization in Illinois, we saw an additional advancement in things like community investment grants. And so now we're looking forward to the future at places like New York that are going to be learning and building on Illinois. So we're in a particular moment where getting it right is super important. It will result in billions of dollars for our communities. And so we wanted to make sure that moving forward in any conversation about cannabis, equity advocates have the tools to advance our agenda. And so I want to show a quick video here about our third policy summit in Oakland that gets to the core of it. And then I'm going to kick it over to Amber to talk a little bit more about what it actually means to use our model policy in different political contexts. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here quickly and pop this one up here. And this was our Oakland policy summit.
I'm excited to be here here for our third annual policy summit. This is really where we focus our energy to bring together the best and brightest minds to create policy. Folks who are concerned, impacted by, care about people who are impacted by cannabis policy, of course, need to have a real conversation about how to do this.
Spent most of the day talking about policy and really trying to figure out how to create a framework that's equitable, that's fair, and that can help social equity participants and the industry as a whole to move forward.
Just remember, throw ideas out there. Do not be constrained by what you are typically constrained by in your business and advocacy and policy creating life.
Each person that gets licensed must have a plan of community empowerment.
Companies that survive moving forward have to be socially responsible.
Throughout these breakout sessions, we realized that we actually have a lot of synergies within these topics already. So it just adds on to the greater good that we're doing.
I think there's a really good energy. There's a really exciting mix of super intelligent, super fun, and creative people here. So I can't wait to get to work with them.
It's priceless to have like-minded individuals able to share ideas and have a space to really come up with policy that will move the industry forward.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's really bringing people together, right? And so here we have 40 of the brightest cannabis minds in the country, especially people of color. And so that, for me, rejuvenates my soul as part of what keeps me going, and this feeling keeps me going every day.
I mean, I've been in a lot of marijuana spaces, both at the Capitol and all throughout the Bay Area. This is the most diverse one that I've been to thus far, and I think that's incredible. So, I mean, if we can continue getting diverse folks here, getting diverse perspectives, then, I mean, we can really move forward in the way that we need to.
And the work that we're doing not only solves for some of the issues that arose from the war on drugs, but also it's just good business practices, and we're making a better industry for everyone.
All right, so that was our time in Oakland. We had a great time there, and thanks to everybody that helped make that happen. But just in a quick overview, basically we bring together lots of experts. We have small working groups in different sections of laws, whether that's criminal justice and expungements, letting folks out of prison, licensing, taxation, zoning. We try to put as many experts in a room to really discuss how do we build equity into this. And so it could be a very diverse range of people, a very diverse range of topics. And of course, that's what we need to create a comprehensive bill. And so we take that information that we got from all the stakeholders, we then bring that to our legal team who puts it into language, and then the MCBA board finalizes and makes any amendments, and that then becomes our model policy. And so once that policy is done, we share it with the world, and anyone can use it. You can take it as a foundation and change it and use it for your community. We have both a model municipal ordinance for a local level. We also have a model state legalization bill for the state level, which we're rewriting and hopefully will come out shortly. And then we also have our priority legislation at the federal level that Amber will speak to a little bit more. But the idea, again, is we can't be everywhere at once, but we are a huge, talented, powerful movement. And so if we can give everyone better tools to be more effective, that's the best use of MCBA's time and talent. And so, to talk a little bit more specifically about how you can use our model policy and actually engage legislators, I want to kick it over to Amber Littlejohn, our senior policy advisor, to talk about how does this policy actually get implemented and where has it been implemented?
So thank you for that, Jason. In the state, the legal cannabis programs are split into three levels, essentially. So we're going to have the local level and municipal level regulation. We are going to have states. And then to the extent that the federal government is involved, the federal government, of course, that is the emerging piece of this. But at the local level, this is really kind of the roots of the grass in our grassroots movement. This is the community level. This is the business owner level. So this is where we really find that our model policies are needed to help actually operate these businesses and help really guide funding, help guide local tax ordinances, help guide reinvestment in the community. And so what we're really seeing people call on MCBA to do through our model policies and the way that people are using our model policies is to really help kind of to support local lawmakers and to really compel local lawmakers when it comes to making sure that the folks within the community that are participating in the industry have the tools that they need. And that there aren't really undue regulatory burdens that are keeping people in our community from participating. Everything from zoning ordinances that can become problematic and how the local social equity programs are set up. In states like California, where these social equity programs are local, our local ordinance legislation becomes really critical because it helps to create a framework for legislators that again are trying to roll out a pretty comprehensive program. And so on the state level, these are driving entire markets. And this is, we are a state-based industry as it stands right now. When you're dealing with a state like California, California has an economy bigger than many nations. So how our community and the role that our community plays in the industry is really majorly impactful. And these programs that the legislators are rolling out are staggering undertakings because they're not just, of course, for us, the equity portions are front and center and the most important thing. But legislators and regulators are rolling out programs that have consumer protection elements, retail elements, agricultural, public safety. And so it's very easy for social equity to be lost in that discussion. And commonly, if we don't give lawmakers the tools in their face and insist that they use them, and if we don't set a standard and hold them to it, it's very easy for them to say, you know what, we're really busy dealing with all of these other very important things, so we don't have time to think about your community. And far too often that happens. And so we've really been able to use our model policy to support lawmakers to pick through our policy, and we kind of consider it a sort of a buffet of great ideas, I think Jason says, where we really want lawmakers to be able to take what we think are the best ideas and the ideas that are most supportive of our community and put those into law. And we want them to be able to do it efficiently, and we want them to have no excuse. So again, this becomes really, again, highly important in states as we're starting to see really great variation in the success of social equity programs throughout the states. And again, as these are serving as the anchor of the market and the access points for the market, it's imperative that we get it right. And so when it comes to getting it right, MCBA is really committed to coming into states within the Mid-Atlantic. We are setting our sights on New York and coalition building in New York to be able to take our model policy and be able to help the citizens of New York really lay the foundation for a strongly equitable, sensible legal cannabis program. And so how we use both our state and our local model policies is really through our network of passionate and gifted advocates that belong to MCBA. And again, as Jason said, we provide those tools, and we arm our members and arm our community partners with these tools that they can take to hearings. They can submit them, they can pick and choose and use it and repurpose our language to put into formal comments to governments and lawmakers. They can use our language when speaking to the public. And it's really, again, sort of an open sourced, please take and use as you need and want set of documents. And, because sometimes when we're talking policy issues, it can be overwhelming, especially when you are a lay person. There is often a level of intimidation and saying, oh gosh, I have a voice and I have an opinion, but I don't feel like I speak that, the policy language. As somebody who is a professional advocate, I will say that the voices of the constituents and the voices of the community are absolutely the most important. People listen to me because I know how to get into their offices and get an appointment, but the reality is they most want to hear from you, and they most want to hear from the members of the community that have been most impacted by the war on drugs. They most want to hear from the members of the community that are wanting to get into the business, but are facing really extraordinary barriers to entry. So for us, it is a win both for our community and for the movement and for MCBA if we can arm people with tools and with language and just empower them to be a voice. The last place that we implement model policies, and what we're doing there is a little bit different, due to our success and and really the momentum of our local and state policies, we made our way to the federal stage and have been very impactful there to date. We have testified before Congress on issues of small business. We have been influential in, getting the first floor vote, cannabis floor vote through, and are, at the center of policy making. And so what we're doing there, again, is developing our positions and our policies, and we keep them online at MCBA, and you're always welcome to reach out to me for policy positions. And now we are working with a coalition of industry partners to really look at what ultimately the equitable federal regulatory framework will look like. Quite frequently, the argument comes up on the federal stage of, this incremental approach versus comprehensive approach. And MCBA is absolutely unequivocally committed toward having comprehensive hard stop, end of prohibition, absolute end of descheduling, not partial descheduling, not rescheduling, but seeing the end of cannabis prohibition. We do, however, work on issues as we fight that fight and work towards the end of cannabis prohibition. We do fight some incremental battles that are supportive of our community. One that we've been really passionately involved in is getting access to capital to members of our community, because as those of you who are participants in the industry know, that is the biggest barrier to entry and participation in our industry, is just the fact that it is extraordinarily expensive. We can't get loans. We can't get access to traditional types of funding. If you are fortunate enough to operate, it is basically a cash-only business, which adds an additional layer of really kind of risk and challenge to doing business. So again, we are firmly committed towards every step of the way on the federal fight, ensuring that it has to be an equity bill, whether it is comprehensive legislation or whether it is just a small provision or piecemeal legislation. It has to be something that contributes to creating an equitable and sensible cannabis framework. We're firmly of the view that if we don't lay the foundation before the framework is in place, it is impossible to go back and then create an equitable cannabis industry. We are seeing states that are trying to hit the brakes and say, oops, we forgot about equity. But the reality is that is not proving successful. So that, again, is where our model policies come in, so that we can be there at the ground floor, making sure that we are implementing equitable policies.
The classic mute problem. So just real quickly, I'm going to talk a little bit about how do folks actually use it, right? And so Amber did mention a few different ways we can do it, but there's two very simple things you can do. You can download our policy at minoritycannabis.org/policy. There's both the model state bill and also the model municipal ordinance. And you can use it to start a conversation with your mayor, with your city council people, with your governor, with your state representatives, and just email them that policy and say, what do you think about this? How are we advancing equity in my town? Right. And so when you do that, you'll be able to find who on your city council is supportive and who isn't. Just based on their reactions, you'll probably know relatively quickly. And then you now have a relationship with that elected official to actually introduce this bill in your community. And that could be a state bill or a local bill, right? It could be a piece of it. You could say we want to focus specifically on zoning right now because that's going to be an issue and you don't feel that there's any available land in the town, that if you were to pass legalization, there's just no space ready for it. It could be you want to set up an equity commission for your town to kind of do a study on all the different ways that the war on drugs has impacted your community. And so this at least gives you the starting point of something that's been vetted by experts and vetted by business owners and lawyers so that the policymaker knows that they can come to us and get verification of the different pieces of it. And so I think this is going to be something that changes how, as a movement, we're able to operate. So hopefully everybody feels a little less alone. We're more connected. We're more on the same page of what it is that we want, what is possible, and what is going on in the rest of the country. Because the great thing about the equity movement is that the momentum is with us. Like we can see as we move forward. From 5 years ago, equity was not part of the conversation. To California, we advanced it dramatically. Illinois was at the forefront. And in New York, it can't happen without it. And so, definitely shout out to all of our women legislators of color holding it down in New York. Shout out to Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez of New York for chairing the Small Business Committee and hosting us to speak in Congress. And so we do have some fantastic champions among the Black and Puerto Rican and Latino and Asian American and Native American caucuses. And so I think that's another great place to start. If you are somebody that is very progressive or very strong on racial justice issues, ask where the chairs of your, Black and Latino caucuses stand on this particular issue. We're not always supportive. And here in Connecticut, I've actually noticed that the Latino legislators are some of the biggest opponents to legalization and don't even really want to entertain issues with equity because they just think marijuana is bad. And so we may have a lot of work to do there, but at least you're approaching them with policy and not opinions. And you can have a real concrete conversation around how is this impacting our community? What can we do about it? And who can we bring in to help us get the job done? Because I think the community right now knows it's happening elsewhere and other communities are benefiting from it, but there's still some cemented drug war propaganda, hysteria that are still with folks that have, grew up on that. And we owe it to them to explain it to them of both what was wrong about what they were told before, but also just how we can do things better for generations now. And so as someone that was arrested in high school, right? And so I was 16 years old when I was arrested. I think a lot of folks look at people that use cannabis as bad, as criminals, but that is definitely not the case, of course, right? Like we're business owners and entrepreneurs and doctors and lawyers. And I think that's where being an example for all the folks that are listening, if you're in a position of leadership in anything, right, being very open and honest about your positions on cannabis is going to help advance the cause dramatically. If you're doing it at the dinner table, right, is another place. If folks ask, well, how would you actually do that? You can give your uncle that doesn't know anything about equity our model policy and have that conversation, right? And so I think we're at a moment now where we really have to seize the opportunity. The public opinion is definitely with us on the issue, but we need to be strategic in how we have these conversations and move beyond simply just saying rhetoric because we want it to be and into providing very concrete solutions. And so as MCBA, we will be focusing on New York to make sure that happens. So I want to invite everyone on this call, everyone in the CannAtlantic area, everyone in the nation to really start to leverage our national power in local areas. And so local in New York City and in Albany, right? We did it also in Illinois and in Chicago. And as these different states pop up, we can come together with a unified message, a unified demand, a unified document, and help build each other up so that when we also have to go to Mississippi and Florida and Virginia, we can have the same power and do the same thing there so that whenever equity applicants show up, anybody from the equity movement shows up to these big moments where we need a lot of help, that the cavalry is there to support them. And so that's what MCBA seeks to do. We are a membership-driven organization, and so we need folks to be joining and be a part of that and take leadership in their community. And we're happy to provide support for anyone that's willing to go out there and fight the good fight and cause good trouble, because it's definitely necessary, and we are winning in a lot of ways. It's not perfect. There are definitely places where policies that we thought were going to be great did not get implemented in the way that we wanted to, and there's never a perfect policy, and there's not one bill, not even the MCBA bill, that can eliminate racism in the United States overnight. And so it's a continuous fight. We have to be eternally vigilant on making sure that no matter what win we had last year, we have more wins to make next year. And I think that's where we're at. We're happy to work with all the different equity organizations in the country, Minorities for Medical Marijuana, Supernova Women in California, and we're happy to work with anybody else that is doing work, Chicago Normal in Chicago. So there's plenty of fantastic examples of folks that fought and won big gains for their communities. And so I want to make sure that in the Northeast, where I'm from in Hartford, Connecticut, I was born in Connecticut, that we're taking the same fire and making sure that all of our communities are fighting this fight as much as we possibly can. And so thank you again to Tauhid and the CannAtlantic Conference and everybody that came out to engage with us on this particular issue. And we look forward to answering any questions folks have. And I'll kick it over to Amber if she has any final thoughts or any other piece. And I'll say, actually, I remember meeting Amber for the first time in person at our lobby day when we decided to start to do a little more pressure on the federal level. And that was when Earl Blumenauer said in our press conference that there shall be no comprehensive cannabis legalization bill that does not include equity. And so he threw down the gauntlet. I'm happy to run with that. But Amber, what do you think is on your radar for the next 6 months, and how can folks help you out?
Yeah, well, I really want to underscore the breadth of the value of our model policies, because as you mentioned, a lot of the spaces that we go into, members of our communities and lawmakers in our community aren't exactly supportive of cannabis. And we at MCBA, we look at equity very broadly. Of course, we're looking at diversity and inclusion in the industry, restorative justice, but we're also looking at things like community reinvestment and how the cannabis industry is going to interact with our community. And so we have something for every lawmaker and every opinion and every obstacle within our policies. So we really just, again, encourage you to look to some of these less common places to compel lawmakers that maybe are a little bit more concerned about the economics and the impact on the community. Over the next 6 months, we are definitely looking toward laying the foundation in New York, because again, this is going to be, again, one of the biggest markets in the country. And this is an environment where that was absolutely ground zero for the war on drugs and the impact, a devastating impact that it had on our community. And so we are focusing a lot of our efforts on on building the coalition that is going to get this done. Working with lawmakers, community leaders, and members of our minority business community to make that happen. We're going to be staying vigilant on the federal side. We are still in the fight, even for this year, to try and get us access to capital and banking, to again try and level the playing field just a little bit for our communities. And we're definitely going to be looking at moving forward in the fight to end federal prohibition as well. MCBA, when in addition to our policy work, we are supporting members of our business community around the country. So if there is a fight, if there is a need, we just encourage you to reach out. We do a considerable amount of programming that is just really providing, filling gaps in education and needs, just, providing the business intelligence for our community to be competitive, whether that be everything from real estate deals to formation of a business. So if you have needs, either from the policy side or the business side, we just encourage you to reach out to us and to join us and to join our fight.
And just real quickly on the membership side of things. So MCBA has two kinds of memberships. So we have individual memberships and corporate memberships. And so we encourage, if you're an activist, you're not sure how to get involved in the industry, join as an individual member. But if you're someone that's currently running a business and you want to be more engaged, maybe engage with more of our policy work, figure out how we can help you in your community, we also offer corporate memberships. And I'll say Cresco Labs, one of the sponsors of this event, is a big supporter of MCBA. So shout out to Barrington, Rutherford, and Cresco for always supporting all of the great equity work around the country. And we're also working with Parallel to get some stuff done in Pennsylvania as well. So hopefully you will start to hear more from us in Pennsylvania as we move forward. But we try to bring both sides of the equation, the small grower all the way up to the big MSO, to figure out what's going to work for Black and brown people as a whole. And so there's a place for everybody at MCBA. We look forward to hearing more, hear what you think of the policy. Go take a look at it, tear it apart, tell us how you'd make it better. And in that process, we'll come to a more perfect tool for our communities to use across the country. So I think, with that, we'll say thank you, everyone, for continuing to push the cause. And we look forward to working with you wherever you are in your community.
Thank you.